Every teacher has a story filled with passion, dedication, and the desire to change lives. For Mrs. Thompson, teaching was more than a job, it was her calling. For over 20 years, she had dedicated herself to her students, going above and beyond to help each child reach their full potential. Her classroom was small but full of life. The walls were decorated with colorful posters and students' artwork, reflecting the vibrant energy she brought to every lesson. But behind her warm smile and tireless efforts, Mrs. Thompson was struggling. Funding cuts had left her with fewer resources each year. The once plentiful supply cabinet was now nearly empty. Textbooks were outdated, classroom technology was limited, and essential supplies like notebooks and pencils were running low. Yet, despite these challenges, Mrs. Thompson never gave up. Every morning, she arrived early to prepare for her students, determined to give them the best education possible. If a child needed extra help, she stayed late. If a family couldn't afford school supplies, she quietly bought them herself. Her paycheck stretched thin, but her heart was endless. Her passion didn't go unnoticed. Her students adored her, and the parents admired her dedication. But even heroes need help sometimes, and Mrs. Thompson was no exception. What she didn't know was that help was about to arrive in the most unexpected way. One Friday afternoon, while Mrs. Thompson was grading papers, the classroom door opened. Standing there was none other than Oprah Winfrey. At first, Mrs. Thompson thought it was a dream. She blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks on her. "Mrs. Thompson," Oprah said with a warm smile. "May I come in?" Mrs. Thompson nodded, still in shock. Oprah walked into the classroom, looking around at the posters, the students' desks, and the pile of books on the corner table. "I've heard a lot about you," Oprah began, "about the incredible work you do for your students, and today, I'm here to say thank you." Tears welled up in Mrs. Thompson's eyes. For years she had poured her heart and soul into her students, never expecting recognition or reward. To have Oprah standing in her classroom, acknowledging her efforts, was almost too much to process. But Oprah wasn't just there to thank her, she had something more in store. "I want to help," Oprah continued. "I know how hard it can be for teachers, especially when resources are limited. So I've partnered with several organizations to give you and your school a little boost." With that, the classroom door opened again, and several volunteers entered carrying boxes filled with supplies. New textbooks, laptops, art materials, and everything Mrs. Thompson could ever need to create the classroom of her dreams. But the surprises didn't stop there. "Also," Oprah said, "I've set up a scholarship fund in your name to help students in need. And lastly, we've got something for you personally." A volunteer handed Mrs. Thompson an envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a check large enough to cover her personal expenses and give her the financial relief she had needed for so long. Mrs. Thompson's tears flowed freely now. She looked at Oprah, overwhelmed with gratitude. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "You've already said it," Oprah replied gently. "Every day, through your actions, you've said thank you 1,000 times. This is just our way of giving a little back." The news of what happened that day spread quickly. Students and parents gathered around the school, cheering and celebrating the generosity that had just unfolded. For the first time in a long time, hope filled the hallways. Mrs. Thompson couldn't believe how her life had changed in just a matter of hours. The classroom that once felt limiting was now filled with endless possibilities. She walked around, touching the new desks and running her hand across the fresh textbooks. She thought of all the things she could now do for her students. New projects, updated lessons, and technology that would open up a world of opportunities for them. As she sat down at her desk, looking out at the classroom, memories of the past filled her mind. She remembered the children who had struggled but never gave up. The letters she received from former students telling her how much her kindness had meant to them, and the countless smiles she had seen over the years. And now she had the chance to do even more. The scholarship fund would help students achieve dreams they once thought were out of reach. Mrs. Thompson knew the difference this would make in their lives, not just academically, but also in believing in themselves. With the new resources, Mrs. Thompson transformed her classroom. New learning tools inspired her students to reach higher, to dream bigger. The scholarship fund helped the students go to college, something that once felt impossible for many. But more than the supplies or the financial help, what mattered most was the message that Oprah's visit sent: that teachers matter, that their sacrifices don't go unnoticed, that kindness and generosity can change everything. Sometimes life gives us exactly what we need when we least expect it. For Mrs. Thompson, it came in the form of an unexpected visitor with a heart as big as her own. It's a reminder that the smallest act of kindness can ripple outward in ways we can't begin to imagine. One life touched can become hundreds more. One act of generosity can change the world. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming moments. See you next time.